Hi students, this is Mr. Yang. Today we are going to learn something more about statistics. Specifically, we're going to learn about weighted mean. Let's work on the prior knowledge first, which is an example that we have worked with in 1.2 lesson. You get these grades and you want an A- in math class, which is 75%. What is the minimum score that you need in the next quiz to be able to get that A-? So first, this is about a question about getting an average grade, so we need to add up all the points at least. So 75 plus 89 plus 81 plus 65 plus 73 plus 76. Then you're taking one extra quiz that will be our altogether. You already have 6 scores. Then you have another quiz that you're about to take. So in total, there will be 7 quizzes. So in order to calculate the average for all the quizzes together, we're going to divide it by 7. And it needs to at least be 75%. And then to solve it, we're going to multiply both sides by a 7. Add up the top, that's going to give you 459. So the 7 would actually cancel on the left side. So it's 459 plus x. The right side is a 525. And if you subtract the 459 over, x would have to be a 66, which means you at least need a 66% to be able to get an A-. That's what we have learned before. But in this lesson, well, you can see whenever we calculate the normal average, we just add up all the numbers and divide by the number that we have. However, our grades, they actually have different categories and different distribution. Like we have an assessment at 70% and assignment at 30%. So we can't just use the normal way to calculate a mean. So in this lesson, we're going to learn about weighted mean. It is a mean in which each averaged number is multiplied by a weight based on its relative importance. So for example, like I was saying, assessment 70% and assignment 30%, which means assessment is weighted more than assignments. So in that case, that will play some role in what overall grade you may get. So but before we actually get into the weighted mean for our grades, let's start with some more examples about mean. Example 1. In a psychology class, 29 students have a mean score of 90.3 on a test. Then 25 more students take a test, and their mean score is 76.1. So it's a little bit different. We're not just adding up every single number and then divide by how many students we have in total. We actually have 2 groups. But the definition for mean does not change. The definition for mean is still total divided by the amount of something that we have. And in this specific case, is total score divided by the total students. Okay, so let's use that idea. The total students is actually easier to work with first because we have 29 students first and we have another 25 more. So in total is 29 plus 25, which is a 54 on the bottom of the fraction. As for the top, we need the total score. So we actually need the total score for the first group of students, and that will be 29 times 90.3. So again, this mean score basically means after we even out everyone's score, it's almost like everyone is getting a 90.3. That's why the mean score is a 90.3 for those 29 students. And if that's the case, to calculate the total for these 29 students, it's going to be 29 times 90.3. And then plus, so now we have the total for the second group students. So 25 times 76.1. That's the total score for the second group of students. And now we add them together. That will be the total score for all the students. And we'll divide it by the total amount of students. So if you add them together, the top is going to give you 4521.2 divided by the bottom is 54. The question set round to 1 decimal place, so it's going to be 83.7. And you can see it's not 90.3, it's also not 76.1. And more importantly, it's not just 90.3 plus 76.1 divided by 2. So we actually need to use the different amount. And this is where it's a basic idea of weighted mean. The reason you can't just take these 2 mean scores divided by 2 is because 90.3, there are 29 of them. But 76.1, there are only 25 of them. So they kind of have different effect on the actual average. So that's why we have to calculate the total and then divide by the total amount of students. And that is example 1. Example 2 work in very similar ways. So all of these numbers that you see, we have 3 different schools and they have a mean score and they each have an amount of students. The city's PR manager, who never took statistics, claimed that mean score of all ninth graders is 79.7. Of course, the manager just did all three numbers out together, so he did 76 plus 94 plus 69, then divided by 3. Clearly, that does not work. We can't do it that way. It's not just the mean score. Each school have different amount of students, so we have to use the amount of students and the score. And again, it's going to be the total scores divided by the total students. So on the top, we're going to calculate all the total scores for each of the schools. So 76 times 271, mean for the 271 students for Glenwood, and then 94 times 345. And afterwards, it's 69 times 152. So that is the total score, which will come out to be 63514. And afterwards, the bottom, we're going to divide by the total amount of students. So now, when we divide by the total amount of students, we're just looking at the students. Again, it's not the total mean score. We're not looking at these. We're looking at total amount of students. So it's 271 plus 345 plus 152, which will make that into 768. And then we divide these two numbers. That is the actual mean score for all the students. So it's 82.70. So you see, it's not 76, not 94, not 69, not 79.7. It's kind of closer to, well, it's kind of in the middle, but at the same time, it's not exactly closer to any of them because they all have different amount of students, which have different effects on this actual average. So that is example 2. Moving on, example 3. GPA, which keyword again is grade point average. So in order to calculate an average, again, we need the total. So GPA actually is grade points total divided by the amount of credits. And this is how your GPA is currently calculated in our school. This is also going to be how your GPA is calculated the next year in high school or in the future in college. They all work the same way. It's going to be the grade point total divided by the amount of credits that you're taking. And in order to calculate the grade point total, of course, you are going to need to calculate the grade point for each class. So a 3.8 with a 5 credit class is going to be 3.8 times 5. Typically, when you have a transcript, you have like A is 4.0, and then A minus is like 3.7, or in this case, maybe 3.8. And then B plus is like 3.3, and then B is 3.0, and you keep going down. So these are the actual points you are earning based on the letter grade that you get. So it's 3.8, but since it's 5 credits, in total, that class, you earned 3.8 times 5. I'm going to do the same thing for every single class. So it's 1.9 times 3, and it's 2.9 times 5. Lastly, another 2.9 times 5. And then we're going to divide by how many credits we actually took. So 5 credits, 3 credits, 5 credits again, and another 5 credits altogether. That is 18 credits. And then afterwards, the top is going to be 53.7. The bottom is going to be 18 after you divide from to 2 decimal places. That should give you a 2.98 as a GPA. But as you may notice, the way we set things up are exactly the same like the previous examples, 2 examples. The top is going to be the total for each one, and then you add them all together. So it's going to give you a total for everything, and then divide by a total amount. In this case, it's going to be the total credits. So that is example 3. Moving on. Now we're actually going to work with weighted mean. Our math grade is calculated 70% from assessment and 30% from practice. So here are some scores for assessments and practice. Points possible means the highest point you can get for, say, for assessment is 40, and the highest point you can get for practice is 500. You can clearly see we won't be able to just add them together to say, oh, the highest point possible is going to be 540. We can't, because these 2 categories are actually weighted differently. So you need to calculate them separately and also put the weight onto that number and eventually calculate the total. So first, to be able to do that, we do need to figure out how many points or what percent as a grade did Jafar actually earn for assessment. 26 out of 40 which is going to give you a 0.65 or 65%. So out of just assessment, Jafar has earned 65% for just assessment, which in other words, it's 65 per 100. So if the total is actually 100, he had earned 65 points. Practice, we're going to do the same thing, 440 over 500, which is going to be 0.88, and that is 88%, which in other words, that means if the total is 100, Jafar have earned 88 points out of 100 for practice. So let me write that down, 65 out of 100. And this is 88 out of 100. But here's the issue. It's not out of 100. It's actually out of 70. So if it's out of 100, he earned 88. Then out of 30 for practice or out of 70, the numbers will be different. So here's how we can treat these numbers. So that's a 70%, which is actually a 0.7. You can choose to change all of them into decimal, and then your answer is going to be a decimal, and you can change it back to a percent, or you can actually use the percent. You can also do just multiply by 70. That works as well. So 0.7 is we're converting this 65% or 65 out of 100 into out of 70. And then practice is we're converting this 30% or 0.3 to be out of 30. Now, calculate it. The top one is going to be a 0.455, and the bottom one is going to be a 0.264. So as I was saying, you can either choose to write them down this way, or you can choose to write it as 65% times just the actual score, 70, and that would give you a 45.5, which in other words, if it's actually out of 70, Jafar has earned 45.5. And then the other one is going to be 88% times 30. So if it's out of 30, Jafar would earn 26.4 points. Okay, so if you chose to use the decimal way, now you're going to need to add them together, which is going to give you 0.719. Then you need to convert this into a percent, which is 71.9%. If you chose to use just the actual number like 70 and 30 without the percent sign, well, you will get a 71.9, but that would already be in percent, so the final answer is still going to be 71.9%, whichever way you prefer. You can either choose to change them into decimals, or you can choose to just ignore the percent and put the percent symbol back on at the very end, because you are calculating a percent for a grade. So there we go. That's example 4. But some of you always had the question towards the end of each quarter. You would ask me, wait, Mr. Yao, what if I just make up an assignment? How much would that change my grade? Or you may ask, what if I retake this portion of the quiz? How much would that change my grade? Well, let's actually find out. Here's question A. Jafar made up a missing assignment and he earned 9 out of 10 points. But first, the assessment part wouldn't change. So let's just write down everything for the assessment. Still going to be 26 out of 40, which is still going to be 65%. And in that case, when we multiply it with a 0.7 or a 70, that is still going to give us the 0.26, it's 0.455. There we go. Okay, but this time the practice changed. Let's make something clear. Points possible. This number, you can pause here and think, would it actually change? The answer would be no, because the points possible have already been set. Just Jafar chose to not do that assignment, which means he earned a 0 out of 10 on that assignment, but it wouldn't change how many points he could potentially get. So the 500 wouldn't change, even though the question said 9 out of 10. The 10 is already included in that 500. So it's the points earned that is changing, because now he earned an extra 9 points. So this will become 449. So 449 divided by 500, which is going to be 89.8%. I'm going to multiply that by a 0.3, not just by 3, it's by a 0.3. And that will give us a 0.2694. My suggestion is, in the process, never actually round these answers, only round them at the very end. Okay? So you can add them together, which is going to give you a 0.7244. So Again, if you choose to use 65%, instead of choosing to multiply by 0.7, you multiply by 70, that's fine. That's going to give you 45.5. And then the bottom one, you're just going to use 89.8%. Instead of multiplying by 0.3, you're multiplying by 30. That will give you 26.94. Then you add them together, which is 72.44. Either way you choose to do, you are going to get a 72.44% as a grade. And that is his new grade. So if you actually make comparison to the previous question, which was 71.9%, you only went up 0.54%, which is not much at all. So this is the result if you just make up a missing assignment. Let's continue. Let's see what if you make up a quiz. So here's the other situation. Let's say you didn't make up any missing assignments, but of course for our class you do have to make up the missing assignments. In this case you did. Let's say he didn't. So the practice wouldn't change. It's still going to be 440 out of 500, which is 88%. And you can choose to multiply that by 0.3. That's still going to be a 0.264. Or again, you can choose to use the 88% multiplied by 30. That's going to give you 26.4. Okay? The practice part did not change. So I just kind of copy it from the previous examples. But the assessment did change. And it's the same idea because he had already taken this quiz. So the points possible wouldn't change. He just didn't earn a full score, but he's not taking an extra quiz. So points possible still wouldn't change. It's still going to be 40. And then he had a 1 before. It's just now it's a 3. From a 1 to a 3, it went up 2 points. So that means the points earned is changed into a 28, not 29. Because he only earned 2 extra points. They're going to follow the same process. 28 over 40, that is 70%. You can choose to multiply by a 0.7. That is going to give you a 0.49. Or you can choose to use the 70% times by 70. That's going to give you a 49. And then you add them together. You can either choose to use the decimal, which is going to give you 0.754. Or you can just ignore the percent sign and add them this way. No matter what, the result is 75.4%. And compared to the 71.9% he had before, just retaking a quiz to get from a 1 to a 3. I didn't even say getting to a 4. It was just getting to a 3. It's already going up by 3.5%, which is quite a bit compared to making up an assignment. But also, imagine you make up an assignment but also retake a quiz, then your grade could actually be going up quite a bit. So that is example 4. Now we're going to practice a bit more about weighted mean. I'm going to go a bit faster. Same thing. 72 out of 100. That is 0.72%. And then is 245 out of 800. And that is going to be 25%. Is it? Yes, 25%, I think. Okay. And then for the first one, you are multiplying it by a 0.7. And the second one, you are multiplying it by a 0.3. So the second one is going to become, wait, let me make sure. Oh, actually, this is not 25%. This is going to be 30.625%. Again, no rounding. We are just doing what we're actually keeping everything. So if you multiply by a 0.3, you're going to get a 0.091875. And the top one, if you multiply, it's going to give you a 0.504. And then we just add these two numbers together. That is going to give you a 59.5875. And that would be rounded to 59.59%. There we go. That is example 5. Again, if you want to change everything into percent already right here, be careful. You need to move the decimal point to the right twice. So it's going to be a 50.4%, and this is going to be a 9.1875%. That is example 5. Example 6. This time the score is already given, so you do not have to calculate the 440 over 500. You don't have to do that anymore. So right here, 86, and the percent, this is 0.3, this is 0.4, or 30%, or 40%, and this is another 30%. So the way it's set up, this is a situation at Riverton High School. So you're actually going to use 86 times the 30%, and you're also going to use the 71 times the 40%, and this is going to be the 68 times the 30%. We're going to get a few different answers. So let's have a look. 86 times the 0.3, that's going to give you 25.8. You can either keep the percent sign or just add it at the very end. And then 71 times a 0.4, that's going to be 28.4. Lastly, 68 times 0.3, that's going to be a 20.4. And then we are going to add all of them together, and that is going to give you a 74.6% as a grade. But let me remind you, at Riverton, the tests are not retakeable. So you can kind of think what is the best course of action to raise the grade. The last example, you can pause here and try it out, but after you finish trying, the answer should be 82.6%, and that letter grade would be a letter B. And that is everything for this weighted mean lesson. Thank you.